Hello and welcome to another episode of the Adult Autism, a Spectrum of Uniqueness podcast. I'm Chris Quarto. Today we're diving into something that so many of my clients struggle with, that being anxiety. Anxiety, it's kind of like that uninvited guest that shows up to a party you're hosting, and you think to yourself, who invited you anyway? And the problem is that it doesn't need an invitation. It just kind of shows up whenever it wants to, although there's some predictability about it based on your unique characteristics and experiences as an autistic person. A lot of clients will ask, well, what do I do about anxiety? I've been struggling with this for years, and hopefully, you'll discover at least one thing you can experiment with after you listen to this podcast episode that might help take the edge off from anxiety a little bit. Now, we're going to look at a couple of things here, where anxiety comes from, what keeps it going, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it. Okay, so first things first. You are not alone in your struggle with anxiety. In fact, research has shown that anxiety is much more common in autistic adults than it is the general population. Now, without getting too deep in the weeds, let me spout off some research findings. A few years back, there was a large study that found that around 27% of autistic adults have a diagnosed anxiety disorder, and almost 42% have had at least one at some point in their life. Now, another study found that autistic adults are about 2.5 times more likely to experience anxiety compared to non-autistic adults. So that says something for sure. Now, the numbers, they're kind of interesting, but they only tell part of the story. When researchers actually sat down and talked with autistic adults about what anxiety feels like, their words painted a vivid picture. One person described it like this: it's like a roaring engine that never shuts off, it's always running in the background. Another research participant said, I'm always watching. What's coming next? What do I have to do? What did I miss? For some of these autistic folks, anxiety wasn't just about worrying. It was about constant anticipation, trying to read a world that keeps changing its rules. Others discussed anxiety that's triggered by sensory experiences, like one woman explained, when the lights are harsh or the noise is constant, I feel trapped. The worry starts in my body before I'm even consciously aware of what's happening. And other research participants talked about how anxiety affected their self-image. One guy said, every time I get anxious, it feels like I'm proving I don't belong. Very sad. So, when you read about the broad range of people's experiences, it shows how anxiety for autistic adults isn't just um, a mental experience. It's physical, it's emotional, it's social, all at once. And understanding why anxiety happens can help you start to untangle it. Now, if you're going to understand why it happens, it's helpful to go back to the future, so to speak, because anxiety doesn't just appear out of thin air. It often grows out of the experiences we've had, especially when we were younger. For many autistic adults, childhood and family experiences sow the seeds of anxiety as an adult. Maybe you, I don't know, grew up feeling misunderstood or pressured to act normal. Maybe you were told to stop being so sensitive or just try harder. And when your natural ways of thinking and feeling weren't accepted, your brain learned to stay on guard. That constant alertness. That's anxiety training. That's how the seeds of anxiety start to sprout and grow. But It's just not those experiences. Chronic stress and trauma can play roles too. Think back to school. Were you ever bullied? Maybe you were criticized by classmates or teachers or chosen last when you participated in organized games on the playground or gym class. You may have even felt excluded from things with classmates, sleepovers, parties, whatever it was. Even if no single event was dramatic or traumatic, the ongoing stress of being misunderstood, of trying to fit in, that can wire your nervous system to stay in fight or flight mode. Now, it's not that you're anxious for no good reason. Your body and brain learn that the world could be unpredictable, it could be unsafe, it could be isolating. And you did your best you could to survive. Okay, let's fast forward to today. You might still be living in ways that keep anxiety alive, not because you want to, but because the world around you keeps pushing those same buttons as they did when you were younger. Let's be honest. Most environments are built for neurotypical people. Social rules are unspoken. Schedules change without warning. Meetings or social events or social get-togethers, they can get loud, they can get confusing. And you're expected just to kind of go with the flow. Now, for an autistic brain, all that unpredictability, that sensory chaos, that can send your anxiety through the roof. And then there's masking. All that effort you expend to appear normal. You smile when you're uncomfortable. You force eye contact. You keep small talk going, or you hide your stim. You might even push through burnout just to meet other people's expectations. That constant performance, man, that takes so much energy and it keeps your brain on high alert. And let's not forget those old internalized messages that fuel anxiety. I'm just too much. I'm too quiet. I'll mess this up. I'm too whatever. And logically, you might know that those old scripts shouldn't matter so much, but your brain and your body are trying to convince you that they do. And anxiety is there to emphasize that point. Now, let's talk about something that happens to almost everyone with anxiety, autistic or not, but in a way that looks different for autistic folks. Sometimes you might unknowingly reinforce anxiety without even realizing it. And when I say that, I'm not trying to cast blame on you. It's more about increasing your awareness of what might be happening so you can do something about it. Okay, let's consider some things you might be doing. Avoidance is a common way of dealing with anxiety. You avoid the situation that makes you anxious. Maybe it's a social event like a holiday party or a last minute get together with parents of your child's Boy Scout or Girl Scout troop. Or it might be a new environment, like, I don't know, a dentist office. You know, those fluorescent lights and high-pitched sounds just might be too much to handle. Now, in the short term, you might feel better by avoiding those situations, but over time, your brain learns avoiding things keeps me safe, and my anxiety is kind of kept at arm's length when I avoid things. But unfortunately, that's going to backfire on you because avoidance, that'll just strengthen the anxiety loop the more that you do it. Now, over preparing or checking, that's another thing that you might do. Are you the type of person who maybe researches everything or rehearses conversations in your head or maybe plan for every possible outcome? Once again, these are things that might provide you with short-term relief, but in the long term, it tells your brain the only way to be safe is to control everything. Now, we can't forget about masking and people pleasing. When you hide your true self to avoid rejection, your brain stays on guard, like it's continually scanning for mistakes you make or cues that something bad is about to happen or could happen. And anxiety is the byproduct of all that effort you put into not blowing your cover. Your brain never gets the message, I am okay as I am. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on is self-criticism. When um, things don't go perfectly or like you feel like they should go, you start shooting arrows at yourself. Like, geez, I should have done better. Or what's wrong with me? Why can't I be more like Jessica or whomever? Those might be things that you were told by parents or other people when you were growing up. You might even feel like because you're not good enough, you deserve to feel anxious. It's sort of like your punishment to atone for your sins of not measuring up, so to speak. So any of these patterns are natural and protective. They made sense at some point in your life, but maybe now you can start to rely on them a little less often. And a good way of doing this is by doing some experimenting with new ways of responding to situations. Hey everyone, Chris Quarto here. You may have heard me talk before about something I'm putting together that I can't wait to share with you. It's an online course for newly diagnosed autistic folks. Newly diagnosed meaning in the last year or two. Here's what's included: masking, emotional exhaustion, and autistic burnout, how to tell people that you're autistic, and how to navigate those relationships moving forward, and putting together the pieces of your autistic identity. Sound like that's something you're interested in? I'm guessing yes. And by the way, you don't have to be newly diagnosed to take the course. Any autistic person will benefit from what's in there, which is very practical and designed to make significant and lasting changes in your life. Send me an email if you'd like to be put on the waiting list, and I'll let you know when it's ready, which will likely be in fall 2025. My email address is chris@chrisquarto.com. And now back to the episode. All right, so let's talk about tools that you can actually use to deal with anxiety. I'm going to discuss three strategies to manage anxiety and then some ways of advocating for yourself as a way of managing your anxiety. It's possible that only maybe one of these strategies might resonate with you, and that's okay. Just do a little bit of experimenting, like I said, to determine which one works best for you. Okay, when you're anxious, your body wants to move fast. Your heart rate starts beating faster. Your breathing speeds up, whether you realize that or not. And your muscles tighten. It's like your body is convinced you're in danger, even when you're not. That's where the first strategy, deep breathing, can be really helpful. And I'm sure you've heard about this technique lots of times. And there's a reason for that, though, because it works. It actually is one of the simplest and powerful ways to tell your nervous system, you're safe now, you're okay. It regulates things. It slows down your heart rate. It lowers that muscle tension, and it gives your brain the oxygen it needs to think clearly again. Now, here's how it works. You breathe in deeply through your nose first for 5 counts. And if you're doing this the right way, you'll feel your belly expand like a balloon filling with air. And you can even place your hand on your belly while you're doing this to test that out. So hold that breath for 5 counts and then exhale slowly, this time through your mouth for 5 counts. Think of this as, I call this triangle breathing. So you start slowly, breathe through your nose, the bottom part of the triangle. Hold your breath the one side of the triangle and slowly exhale through your mouth the last side of the triangle. And you repeat that 5 times. That's all there is to it. Now, if breathing deeply makes you dizzy, just pause for a minute and take normal breaths. And if you want to, give it another try, just do 4 counts instead of 5 for each step. Now, the next strategy, I call this connect the dots. And this is more of I guess you would call it more of a long-term strategy, meaning that it's a good skill to learn, something that'll serve you well for a long time once you figure out how to do it. Now, sometimes anxiety doesn't make sense in the moment. It might feel, I don't know, too big for the situation. You might think, why am I freaking out over something this small? But oftentimes, what's happening is that your nervous system is reacting to something older from your past. And the idea here is that your past experiences can shape how you react to things today. In fact, old patterns of behavior can sneak into new situations without you even realizing it. Like maybe when you were younger, you got scolded for making mistakes. So now, when your boss points out a mistake, your body reacts the same way it did when you were a kid. Like you're in danger. Your heart's racing, your mind is spinning, that kind of stuff. But obviously, you're not in danger. So again, what you're trying to do is to connect the dots between then and now. How is what happened to me in the past impacting me now as an adult? And here's the thing. Once you learn to spot the pattern, the reaction starts to lose its power. So give this a try. When you notice a strong wave of anxiety, pause and ask yourself, does this feeling feel familiar or remind me of something familiar? And when else in my life have I felt this way? You might not be able to do that in the moment when you feel anxious, and that's okay. You can always do some reflecting on this later on. And then what you can do is either write down or say out loud whatever comes up. So, for example, you might realize, you know, this feels like those times when my father pressured me to do math homework when I didn't understand it. And finally, you take a slow breath and remind yourself, that was then. This is now. I'm safe and I have choices today. In fact, what I recommend with my clients is that they do a little mantra. That was then. This is now. That was then. This is now. And maybe do some deep breathing as they're saying this to themselves in their brains. So essentially, you're just trying to get better at noticing when old emotional habits pop up so you can respond with awareness and curiosity instead of just reacting emotionally. Now, it's not always easy to do this. If it's hard to identify a connection to the past, don't force it. Just understand this feels familiar and move on. Insight doesn't happen quickly. That's why a lot of people go to therapy. Usually it grows slowly over time. If you feel overwhelmed when you think about experiences from your past, then just do some grounding first. In other words, take some slow, deep breaths, like I was talking about before with that triangle breathing. Or maybe do some body massages, like firmly stroking your forearms and your legs with your hands. Do some of that. Now, the last strategy has to do with untangling from your worry. And the idea is simple. You are not your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. And here's what I'm talking about. When an anxious thought shows up, like, I'll embarrass myself at that meeting, or maybe it's just an anxiety feeling that you become aware of, instead of fighting it, take a step back and just notice it. In fact, you might consider physically taking a step back the first few times you do this to make it a concrete experience because that's what'll help you develop the skill. And part of noticing, you say to yourself something like, ah, there's that worry again. Or, hey, worry, I see you, as if you can't hide from you. That's noticing. Now, if you can, imagine the thought or feeling as a leaf floating by on a stream, or maybe a cloud floating by in the sky. And you don't have to grab it. You don't have to push it away like you might normally do. You're just letting it pass. You're just being an observer of something that's apart from you. Like you're watching a movie. It's about distancing yourself or untangling yourself from the thought or the feeling. Now, if you have trouble creating distance between yourself and the anxious thought or that feeling, try referring to yourself in the third person. Like my name is Chris. So if I were struggling with this, I might say something like, Chris sees that worry is here again. Or Chris is having the thought that someone is going to think badly of him. That gets you into the mind frame of separateness. Now, managing anxiety isn't just your job. You can ask the people around you to help create an environment that actually fits your brain. And that's all about advocating for yourself. Now, here are a few ways that you can do that. One thing you can do is ask for predictability and clarity. You could say to someone, it really helps me when I know what to expect. Could you give me a heads up if plans change? That simple, heads up, that lowers anxiety more than most people realize. You can also ask for clear, direct communication. You might say something like, if something's wrong, could you just, tell me directly instead of hinting? Because it's kind of hard for me to pick up on that kind of stuff. Okay, now next, ask for sensory friendly adjustments, like explain to people that you get overloaded easily by sensory stuff. You might say, loud sounds or bright lights kind of make it hard for me to focus for some reason. Would you mind lowering the volume, or maybe we could find a quieter space to talk? Um, if you work, you might say, would it be okay if I wear noise canceling headphones? Small shifts like that can completely change how your body experiences anxiety. Now, a final thing you can do is ask for processing space. You might say, sometimes I need a few seconds to think about something before I respond. If you can give me that space, it would really help me. Or if we talk about something big, I may want to follow up later with you once I had time to think about that. Is that okay with you? That lets you respect your needs, and also it lowers social pressure. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover on this podcast episode. Here's something to remember. You don't have to do any of the stuff that I talked about instantly. I mean, change takes time. So give yourself that time. Give yourself space. Give yourself compassion in particular, is that self-compassion. Anxiety has probably been with you for a long time, so it'll probably take some time to learn ways of managing it. Thanks for listening, and remember, your uniqueness is awesome.